All that in the next hour with Ben Habib and Paul Embry. Don't go anywhere. First, though, the latest news headlines with Tatiana Sanchez.
Bev Turner, thank you very much and good evening. The top stories: Irish police are investigating a potential terrorist link to an attack on an army chaplain at a barracks in Galway who was stabbed multiple times. He was taken to hospital with serious injuries which are not thought to be life-threatening. A teenage boy was arrested by armed police during the incident last night. The victim has been named as Chaplain Paul Murphy, who's released a statement thanking his friends for their support and assuring everyone that he'll be OK. In other news, victims of the infected blood scandal can receive support scheme payments for life under changes to a multi-billion-pound compensation plan. Meanwhile, those who were subjected to unethical research will get up to £15,000 extra. That's after the government accepted the majority of recommendations from an independent review into planned compensation for victims. More than 30,000 people who received NHS treatment between the 1970s and early 1990s were infected with contaminated blood. Train drivers on LNER are to stage a series of strikes claiming a breakdown in industrial relations and breaking of agreements. Hundreds of members of ASLEF will walk out every Saturday between the end of this month and the 9th of November, and also every Sunday from the 1st of September to the 10th of November. That is a total of 22 days. The dispute is separate from the long-running row over pay, which is set to be resolved after a new offer this week from the government. Border Force staff at London Heathrow Airport are striking for 23 days from the 31st of August. The long-running dispute about enforced changes to terms and conditions, including the introduction of inflexible rosters, began in April. The PCS union says around 160 staff have left the Border Force because of the lack of flexibility, whilst others have been forced to change their working hours and practices. Megan Gallagher has resigned as Scottish Conservative deputy leader. It's amid concerns over the alleged conduct of outgoing party leader Douglas Ross in relation to the general election. In a statement today on X, Ms Gallagher said she was deeply troubled by reports in The Telegraph that current leader Mr Ross allegedly asked Tory candidate Kathleen Robertson if he could replace her in July last year, a claim he has denied. Mr Ross says he accepted her resignation with regret. Foreign Secretary David Lammy has arrived in Jerusalem with his French counterpart to urge a ceasefire in the war in Gaza. It's the first joint UK-France visit to the region in over a decade, where the ministers are expected to visit the occupied Palestinian territories. David Lammy appeared optimistic that peace talks are going well.
I am pleased that the reports out of Qatar suggest that the first day of hostage talks has gone well, and it has been important to listen to ministers here in Israel and hear too from them that they hope that we are on the cusp of a deal.
The mother of a 13-year-old girl who died after having a severe reaction to a Costa Coffee hot chocolate says allergen safety training shouldn't be treated as a tick box exercise. The inquest found a failure to follow the processes in place to discuss allergies. Hannah Jacobs died within hours of taking just one sip of the drink in February last year. A post-mortem found Hannah died after suffering from a hypersensitive anaphylactic reaction. The statement was read on behalf of Hannah's mother this afternoon.
She had a known allergy from a young age, what her allergies were, and took them very seriously. I've always been extremely diligent in managing Hannah's allergies, and she has never suffered a serious allergic reaction prior to this incident. Hannah loved life. She was a vivacious, caring, affectionate, outspoken and energetic child with a strong sense of right and wrong. Hannah had everything to live for and was so full of life and promise.
And Prince Harry has appeared to subtly weigh in on the recent riots in the UK, which were partly sparked by online misinformation. Harry said what happens online within a matter of minutes transfers to the streets and people are acting on information that isn't true. The couple were officially invited by Colombia's Vice President Francia Marquez, who says she was moved by their controversial Netflix documentary where they laid bare their troubled relationship with the royal family, leading to their eventual departure as working royals. Well, during a panel talking about online misinformation, Prince Harry suggested education could help the public spot fake news.
A lot of people are scared and uncertain, and I think one of the solutions to that is education and awareness, because it's becoming harder and harder to stem the flow from the source, and therefore really it comes down to all of us to be able to spot the true from the fake.
And those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Tatiana Sanchez. More from me at 7.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Very good evening. Welcome to News & Co with me, Bev Turner, this evening, sitting in for Michelle. Now, joining me until 7, my panel, Ben Habib, former Deputy Leader of Reform UK, and Paul Embry, trade unionist and author. Remember, I want to hear from you this evening, gbnews.com/your say. Ben, before we start, you are an important part of the Reform Party, in my opinion. I described you as former Deputy Leader of Reform UK. What is the situation now? There was something on Twitter this week about the fact that you're not going to be talking at the conference in September. What is your role and your position there? I'm sorry, I sprung that on you, Ben.
No, that's absolutely fine. I don't have a role in Reform UK. I was, as you rightly point out, Deputy Leader of the party. Richard Tyson and I spearheaded the party. We took it from 6% in the polls to 16% when Nigel came back as leader. In significant part, Richard and I spearheaded the movement that created the 4 million votes that we got in the last election. And I'm sure there are many millions more who would have voted for us, but for the fact that they were scared of a Starmer government and, you know, all that narrative about splitting the vote. And my obligation, and what I feel is critical, is that people like me and Richard, who march these people to the top of the hill, now don't let them down. They've been let down so many times before, in the vote for Brexit, in the general election in 2019 when Boris promised he'd deliver Brexit and then delivered the terrible storm into which the country was delivered by him and his cabinet. And what Nigel, the leadership, and whether or not I'm in the leadership is academic, I will be fighting for the protection and promotion of the promises that we've made to those 4.1 million people that voted for us and the many millions more who will support us if we keep those promises. That's what my aim is.
So you're still there, you're still involved. You're not going to defect to the Tories anytime soon?
I'm not defecting to the Tories. I think the Tory leadership, by the way, is of critical importance to the country. Even though I wanted to obliterate the Tories, even though there isn't a single Tory MP that isn't tainted by the failure of the last government, we've got to get the right leader for them. They've got 124 MPs, and my goodness, we don't want a one nation wet in charge of 124 MPs. We need someone close to Reform's values. That's what we need.
You could defect to the Labour Party with me, Ben. I'll give you a membership application form. I've got one in my bag somewhere to consider.
Don't do that, Ben. Please don't do that. Don't break my heart, Ben Habib.
After the show, I'll take him for a pint.
Right, OK, we've got a lot to talk about this evening. It's been an extraordinary couple of weeks, hasn't it? A 15-year-old schoolboy is the first person to be charged with rioting following nationwide disorder last week. So rioting can carry a maximum term of 10 years in jail, which could be double than that for violent disorder. So 1,100 people have now been arrested for their part in the riots. Nearly 650 have been charged. Just, Paul, give me your reflections on events of the last 2 weeks. It's sort of easy to forget that all of this was triggered by the stabbing of those 3 young, innocent, beautiful girls at a Taylor Swift dance class. And then that started a domino effect, didn't it? Which has, I would say, in some way allowed us to see the true face of who this new Prime Minister is and his deeply draconian and authoritarian ambitions to clamp down on any sort of dissenting think in this country?
I like tough justice, and I have no doubt that some of these characters deserve to be sent to jail for a very long time. What some of them did was monstrous, and we cannot ignore that.
Do you draw a distinction between what they say and what they do in that?
I do. I think if you go and set light to a migrant hotel with women and children inside, it's attempted murder, and you deserve a very, very long stretch in prison. So I've got no problem with tough justice. What I have a problem with is selective tough justice. And I think that what we're seeing play out in our courts at the moment is a little bit performative and a little bit political. Because we don't see this tough justice at any other time. We are constantly reading stories of offenders, serious offenders, violent offenders in some cases, being spared jail or being given a suspended sentence.
That was under the Conservatives, of course. That was 14 years of Conservative government, though.
Bev, it's been under every government for many years. And we read these stories in the media and we can't understand it and we get angry at it. We see violent thugs with a long litany of previous convictions released once again, community order, a suspended sentence. And people get really angry about that because people say, look, if that's what you're doing to your community, if you're a repeat and serious and violent offender, you deserve to be dealt with the full force of the law quickly, and you should go to prison for a long time. But we know in our hearts, and the evidence shows us, that that doesn't really happen. So when you see what we're seeing at the moment with these characters who are being sent to jail for a long time because they've put something on Facebook, or, you know, because they got a little bit, you know, robust and aggressive in front of a police line at a riot, you kind of think, well, hold on a second, why can't the law be that efficient and that harsh the whole time? And the two-tier thing will stick, maybe not so much now, but when the status quo returns again, and in a few weeks' time or a few months' time, we start reading stories in the media of people getting suspended sentences and community orders for really serious offences. That's when the two-tier thing might then start to stick, I think.
Ben, I'm dying to talk to you about this as well, because there's this case, this 53-year-old, this woman, Julie Sweeney, she was given a 15-month jail sentence this week. She posted on Facebook, I'll tell you what she said. She said, don't protect the mosques, blow the mosques up with the adults in it. She admitted she said it in anger because of what she mistakenly thought was the perpetrator of the Southport stabbings, having been a Muslim, and reports of somebody in that area who's a Muslim. That evening, he was caught with a knife in the area. She deleted it really quickly, knew she'd been stupid. And in response, her husband, David Sweeney, has told The Telegraph today, and she is his full-time carer, she was, he said 3 police cars turned up. There were 3 officers. What's that about? It's too big a force for what it was. It's just crazy. It's a big loss. She's my right arm. It does anger you. It's over the top, well over the top. It's hard to come to terms with. She got angry on the night. We watched a news item with her. It just wound her up because of what had happened to those 3 girls. And she's gone to prison for 15 months, leaving him at home on his own without her as a carer. I can't make that make sense, Ben.
I can't make it make sense either. And I mean, I completely endorse everything Paul said. But I would add that this hasn't just been two-tier policing. This has been a two-tiered criminal justice system and a completely... it's almost straight out of the EU playbook. You know, whenever the EU has a crisis or there's a problem, they grant themselves more power. And we've seen Keir Starmer do it this time, you know, reference this woman and the way she's been treated. He's used it to absolutely clamp down on what some of us might regard as free speech. Now, in no way can you endorse someone advocating the burning down of a building.
Of course.
And that is an incitement to violence, which is illegal. But to go in the way that they did, heavily-handed, arrest this woman after she deleted it, she should have got off with a caution.
Yeah.
And the other thing that comes to my mind is the infantilizing of the electorate. The notion that people are moved to violence because some 53-year-old has published a stupid tweet online is to is to infantilise the electorate and to effectively promote into a position of power that this 53-year-old... I mean, I don't know how many followers she had, but I can't imagine many people looked at the tweet.
There were about 5,000 people who followed her on Facebook, but I completely agree with you because...
I think it was in a group with 5,000
in a group with
5,000
people. But, Paul, this idea that somehow mild-mannered British citizens are watching Coronation Street and they come across a tweet on their phone and they are so sort of zombified by what they read on the internet, they suddenly get up and go and smash in a police car. It makes no logical sense. We're giving them too much power.
And no one in the political class is considering the real reason why some of this has started. They think it's all down to Elon Musk, disinformation from foreign states, or Tommy Robinson. And if they draw those conclusions, I think they are completely myopic. Or maybe they're disingenuous. Maybe they know, actually, that there are deeper issues and questions in some of these communities, but they just don't want to discuss those issues because they know that they would then have a hell of a lot of work to do to try to solve some of the problems. So, you know, best not to raise those things as problems.
And it's why they...
But working class people are not dupes. You're absolutely right. They're not dupes. They're not idiots. They can't be hoodwinked in that way. The idea that all of these grievances and this resentment that has been burning away in these communities for a long time, we put that to one side, do we? And we say, no, it's because of something that Nigel Farage said, or it's because of the rhetoric of people like
Something that Elon Musk said.
It's insulting to ordinary people to say that they are that easily misled by that.
That's right.
Sort of
and you know, just to reiterate, there were police officers injured in these riots. That particularly makes my blood boil. These guys and girls are going out there and doing a really, really important job, and the last thing anybody should feel they are allowed to do in this country is to injure a police officer.
But, I mean, on that point, the two Manchester chaps at the airport have yet to be charged. And we've had summary judgment against a whole, I think, 300-odd people or something have been arrested and charged in relation to the riots. But the two guys who broke a female police officer's nose at Manchester Airport have yet to be charged. And, you know, that raises questions in the public. Why not?
They gave their own press conference to put their side of the story across. Go on.
I was going to say, you sort of put the blame earlier, or you certainly mentioned Keir Starmer as if he were responsible. I mean, look, I'm not Keir Starmer's biggest fan, but I'll come to his defence on this. I think, actually, we need to look at the judges who are, as I say, a lot of them are perfectly justified in terms of the sentences. I've got no problem with many of them, probably most of them. But some of them, I suspect, some judges are perhaps enjoying their moment in the spotlight a little bit. I think there's probably a bit of a ratchet effect going on, where judges are looking at other reports coming in and seeing the really hard line that's being taken by their colleagues and thinking, well, I can't be seen as out of step. I've got to jump on the bandwagon as well, and I've got to impose some tough sentences. I don't think we can necessarily... I'm sure Starmer supports a lot of this stuff, by the way, but he's only been in for a month, Ben, and I don't think we can say that this is all down to...
No, I mean, I have to...
Keir Starmer telling the judges what to do or setting the tone or something.
Keir Starmer, as a democratically elected Prime Minister, diagnosed the problem himself by getting up and saying this is all far-right thuggery. I mean, the idea that he could know the political disposition of thousands of people across the United Kingdom who've gone rioting is absolutely ludicrous. But he categorised them as far-right because he wanted not to address their genuine complaint. He wanted to rubbish them. He wanted to make it as if they don't have a genuine complaint. And then seamlessly he went on to say they will be arrested, they will be charged, there will be draconian punishments handed out.
But the judges don't have to go along.
No, but they don't. But he absolutely invoked the criminal justice system.
You're saying he set the tone?
He set the tone, and he's the Prime Minister. And what he should have said, and he could absolutely justifiably say, is they will feel the full force of the law. But it's up to the law to dispense justice. It's not up to the Prime Minister to tell the courts, effectively direct the criminal justice system in how it should behave. And that's what he was doing. He said these are far-right thugs and they should be taken to task and locked up.
But we have to also criticise the judges because...
absolutely.
We have to send the message to the judges, look, the judiciary is supposed to be independent from the government.
No doubt.
And just because a Prime Minister... I mean, Tory MPs and Home Secretaries have always stood up for years saying, we want judges to do this, and judges are quite happy to ignore them.
Paul,
we need to say to the judges, well, actually, you need to exercise your independence in some of these sentences.
But I mean, I can't say unequivocally it's cause and effect. But if you look at the timeline, you get the riots, you get the Prime Minister directing the courts to do what he wants them to do, and then they do it. And to the common man on the Clapham omnibus, that doesn't stack up well.
But I think we do also need to say that comments like Julie Sweeney's, the comments that she made on that Facebook group, were repugnant. I mean, let's be absolutely clear. We do need to
But
stress
would you
that.
lock her up for 15
No,
votes?
But is
no,
she a
I wouldn't.
threat?
And
Is she a threat to
I
the
agree,
public?
but equally, I think she probably does need to be publicly shamed for those sorts of comments because they were outrageous.
But that's
I don't see what's going to be gained by sending... I mean, you know, people say it's incitement. How many people realistically were likely to act on those words? They were crass, they were hyperbolic.
They were angry.
They were certainly angry. I suspect no one was ever likely to act on them. And the punishment has to be commensurate with the crime. And I'm a near absolutist on this stuff. Unless there is genuine incitement to violence where people are likely to act on the words that are being, or the statement that's being made, I think in a free society, people have got to have the right to post offensive, even grossly.
And you know what's happened?
And
I don't know.
Who becomes the arbiter on this?
Yeah.
Well, you know what's happened in the wake of this is that lots of controversial commentators have stopped posting, Ben.
Even senior people in Reform have gone silent.
Quite.
Have you noticed?
I've noticed.
It's got its benefits then, Ben.
But you see, this is...
I haven't gone quiet.
But it depends. Do we want to live in a country where we are quiet because we are frightened? That is your tyranny of silence right there. When I just saw that Kim Jong-un is having tourists in North Korea, and I thought, that's interesting. And I thought, I wonder if he's looked across the UK and gone, well, they're more totalitarian than I am now in the UK, and they've got tourists, and maybe we can have the same thing. I mean, the tone that has been set in the last couple of weeks...
It has.
I find deeply, deeply worrying. Right, we've got to take a quick break. It's been less than 48 hours since the government hailed a new deal with train drivers. So why is their union now planning more strikes? Don't go anywhere. See you in a minute.
GB News Breakfast. Every day from 6 a.m.
Losing someone, saying goodbye, never easy, but there is a way, maybe, to make it slightly more manageable, depending how you think.
Yeah, we're going to speak now to the comedian and British icon, frankly, Paul Chuckle. He thinks it's time to put the fun into funeral. This is after, sadly, he lost his brother, Barry, and Paul now wants to highlight what he perceives to be changing attitudes to the way we hold funerals.
Well, Paul, a very good morning to you. First of all, condolences about Barry. We all knew him, and obviously you still miss him.
Yes, good morning to you too. Yeah, obviously, it was 6 years ago yesterday that he passed away. It's gone very quick, but in Barry's funeral case, you know, it was a thing of celebrating his life, really. All his friends were there, people we've worked with over the years, and we just talked all afternoon and evening about his life. It's more of a celebration.
New research from Co-op Funeral Care says that people are more coming round to this way of thinking, that in the way they dress and what they sing and taking selfies at funerals, all sorts of things. And by and large, I mean, bearing in mind how you said goodbye to Barry, which I believe was at Rotherham Football Club, was it?
Exactly, yeah. I mean, it's always a very sad day when you lose someone. But as a report from Co-op Funeral Care says, a funeral doesn't have to be a sad day, which it wasn't there. See, Barry and myself always been big Rotherham United fans, and the thing was to have his funeral, really, most of his funeral on the day at New York Stadium.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/your-say. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Welcome back. It's Dewbs & Co. with me, Bev Turner, this evening, sitting in here for Michelle. So keeping me company until 7, Ben Habib of Reform UK and Paul Embry, trade unionist and author. Right, I'm so glad you're here, Paul, because this does take a little bit of explaining. The government's joy at striking a pay deal with the ASLEF union and bringing an end to further strike action has been, frankly, very short-lived. Not only have train drivers at LNER now announced a fresh set of strikes, but ministers have been accused of prioritising unions over pensioners. And a fresh row could also be brewing with the RMT union after their General Secretary Mick Lynch threatened fresh industrial action if his members do not get the exact same pay deal as ASLEF. So let's just remind ourselves what Transport Secretary Louise Hay said just yesterday.
I became Transport Secretary, I said we'd move fast and fix things, and that's exactly what we're doing. I'm delighted that we have put forward a 3-year pay deal so that drivers across our railways can vote on it and hopefully bring an end to over 2 years of damaging strikes that have cost the taxpayer more than £800 million in lost revenue and hurt the economy even more. The previous government deliberately provoked and prolonged these strikes and hurt passengers and the economy. In direct contrast, this Labour government will always put passengers first.
Oops, because now they're saying we're not going to accept it. Am I right, Paul? It's complicated. Well, no, they aren't, are they? It's LNER now who are saying, actually, we're still striking.
Yeah, that's a completely separate dispute to the pay deal.
It is a separate dispute, but
completely separate.
Just explain to us how this funding works, because the shareholders of these train companies are making huge hundreds of millions of pounds of dividends. But we, the government, we the taxpayer, are contributing towards the train drivers' pay. How does it work?
Well,
it's a bit of a mess.
We subsidise the railways hugely, which is an argument to say they should be taken back into public ownership.
Which is what
anyway.
Labour are doing, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, they've certainly said that. But we pay huge subsidies to the rail companies, and that, for me, is the argument for public ownership. But the government has effectively taken over negotiations in the ASLEF dispute from the Rail Delivery Group, which is the membership body of the train operating companies, but receives half its funding from Network Rail. Which is a public body. And because the Rail Delivery Group were unable to strike a deal with ASLEF over, well, it was 2 years or whatever it was in the end, wasn't it? The new government said in July, completely correctly, in my opinion, this is going nowhere. We are going to negotiate through the Department of Transport directly with the ASLEF trade union with a view to reaching a settlement. They've struck a deal which has to go to the ASLEF members now. They will have the final say on it, but they've certainly struck a proposed deal between the two sides, which I think is fair and I think is reasonable. And I think if it's accepted, which I think it will be, we'll end the disruption, we'll end the dispute, and I think that's a good thing. And I think if the previous government had been as constructive in its dealings with the union rather than taking a hostile approach, we would have saved ourselves, I think, a whole world of pain.
But it's not a silver bullet, is it? Because, as we've heard, there's going to be more strikes.
It's a separate dispute, though, Ben. We do need to be clear about that. The LNER dispute is a completely separate dispute to the pay issue. That's a localised dispute in a particular train operator regarding things like the breaking of roster agreements, drivers being contacted out of hours, not enough drivers to be able to crew the trains and so on. And that dispute has been brewing for a long time, so we do need to separate those two things.
OK.
They're allowed, apparently, to restart their lunch hour if they get a message from their boss. Are you aware of this, Paul? If they're in the middle of their lunch hour and they get a message from their boss, they're allowed to restart their lunch hour.
I wouldn't believe everything you read in the paper.
Well, that sounds like an EU rule right there, though, Ben.
I mean, it sounds slightly balmy. But when all these strikes kicked off in summer of 2022, after we had that massive spike in inflation, I had great sympathy with the public sector. They've been underpaid for literally a decade, and their wages had fallen behind inflation every year, year in, year out, in significant in part, in my view, because of unbridled imported cheap labour. But you know, we went through a period of renegotiations, and actually a lot of the private unions settled their disputes very quickly at 7-8% levels of increase. And the private sector was settling their own disputes right across the economy at around 7 or 8%, which was sub the inflation hit, but high enough to keep the wolf from the door. It was the public sector strikes that were difficult to bring into line. But the problem I've got with the way the Labour Party's behaved in terms of settling the junior doctor strike and now ASLEF is that it has all the hallmarks of giving in. And if you encourage someone, if someone gets the perception that actually when they press you, they will win, they will be encouraged to do it again. And it's the same approach the Labour Party has used with illegal migration. It's going to fast-track the asylum applications, effectively, in my view, settling all those people in the UK, sending a signal to people smugglers and would-be illegal migrants. Actually, if you make it onto British soils, you will be safe. And they've done the same with knives, where they've given an amnesty on knives and said, hand in your knife, we'll get 10 quid. And, you know, all this signalling is a signalling in the wrong direction.
They're almost like this government is striking me as sort of really bad parents.
It's really bad parenting.
It's really bad parenting,
That's exactly what it is.
It's like threatening things but not carrying it out, and dishing out justice on the child that's behaving themselves. You might say some of the people who've been caught up in these children, caught up in this riot nonsense, and then not coming really down hard on...
This is not an especially generous deal in terms of the train drivers. We're talking about 15% over 3 years. It's a 3-year deal, backdated 2 years with the following year to come. 15% over 3 years when inflation for that period has been well above that, by the way, I don't think is... We're not talking astronomical amounts here. We're talking still about a real terms pay cut for those 3 years.
We've got the border force.
I don't think that... I mean, I know there's been a lot of stuff in the right-wing press about Labour giving in to the unions. This is not actually a particularly generous deal.
We all know how expensive life is at the moment, right? You go and fill your supermarket trolley, it is eye-watering.
Yeah, we're all suffering.
It's extraordinary how expensive basic necessities are.
Not all of us are suffering. There's quite a few people at the top.
There are degrees of suffering, you're right, but everybody's feeling it. And so I do have sympathy with the train drivers who say, my income has not kept up with the cost of living. I've got huge sympathy. We all have huge sympathy. I couldn't agree more. But like you said, what is the messaging that it gives? Because we've got Border Force are now threatening to strike. That's Keir Starmer's secret weapon. That's the only ace card he's got.
Well, illegal migration might reduce if Border Force go on strike.
Controversial. But you're, I mean, look, people see city bonuses go, you know, throughout the pandemic and the cost of living crisis, city bonuses surged and directors' pay went up and our corporations were recording record profits and the banks have made huge unexpected excess profits out of the interest rate rises and the energy companies...
So why isn't the Labour Party tackling that? Can we talk about that? Well, 700 billion pounds of cash created in order to save the banks, and 5% per annum being paid on it, which wasn't paid until interest rates went up, giving the banks windfall profits of 35 billion a year. Why isn't the Labour Party taking that money back? Why is it allowing the banks to continue with it?
It was always the left that would go after the big beasts at the head of the snake, and it's like this Labour Party are just so in bed with the corporate entities.
Because the Labour Party these days has completely lost, I think, its intellectual self-confidence on some of that stuff. It does not see particularly a strong role for government in the economy. It doesn't think the government should be anything more than a bit part player.
The Labour Party?
Yeah, well,
it's so interventionist.
If you compare
it, in all the wrong places.
If you compare it to the post-war consensus, and you know, right up until the late 70s, Ben, when governments took a very, very active role in the economy in terms of industrial strategy and making sure that enough homes were built and, you know, demand management in terms of the economy and so on. I think what we've done is we've thanks to Thatcher, we've rolled back the frontiers of the state, and I think the Labour Party has largely bought that ideology and kind of thought, actually, do you know what? There are people better than elected governments who are more equipped and able to make the big decisions. So we'll hand things like...
who was the ultimate cheerleader for that? Tony Blair.
Well, I agree. Handing interest rate policy to the Bank of England was completely wrong and undemocratic. Handing more and more powers to the EU, handing powers to bankers and business chiefs and saying, you're the experts, you know this stuff. You know, we are not really capable of doing that.
We're going to
I think that we're still seeing that kind of legacy of
and taking away scrutiny. Taking away political scrutiny. No one's held to account. You know, the Bank of England's not held to account. No one can hold Ofcom to account. They can hold you to account. No one can hold them. The Electoral Commission, the Office of Budget Responsibility, all these quangos have dumbed down our democracy. But the Labour Party could overnight swell its coffers by £35 billion per annum.
Ben, I wish they would.
By removing that extra income that the banks get because the banks were rescued.
Right, we've got to move on, fellas. Time to take another quick break. I'm going to be looking at your messages as well while we do this break. But coming up, the World Health Organization has declared, yeah, you guessed it, another global emergency. This time, Mpox. Apparently, monkeypox didn't really work because you all took the mickey out of it. Could this be the next pandemic? You have to stay tuned to find out.
Evening, welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office. Here on GB News, the weekend is upon us, and for most of us, it's going to be a fine weekend. Dry for the vast majority, with some sunny spells and temperatures about the average for the middle of August. One weather fronts that cleared away last night, still lingering close across northern France, and another one is approaching the northwest. So here, yes, it isn't going to be sunny all weekend. There will be certainly overnight plenty of showers and a fairly gusty wind, actually, across the far north of Scotland. Further south, most places with clear skies, lighter winds. That will allow it to turn quite a bit cooler, quite a bit more comfortable compared to recent warm and humid nights. It does make for a fresh start, but generally a sunny start in the south. There'll be some sunshine across northeastern parts of Scotland, but further west and further north, there will be quite a lot of cloud, a few showers moving through and a fairly gusty wind. So just be prepared for that if you're going into the mountains of Scotland tomorrow. Well, quite a significant wind chill. A coolish start too for Northern Ireland, some cloud, the odd shower possible over northwest England, but they shouldn't last too long for the majority across England and Wales. It's a fine, bright, sunny start, and many places will hang on to sunny spells throughout the day. Yes, some cloud will bubble up. It's not going to be one of those crystal clear blue sky days, but sunny spells throughout. Still a few scattered showers over the far north of England, at times across Scotland, but they should be fairly light. They should tend to zip through. One or two of them maybe in Northern Ireland, but most of the day certainly dry, and across the south dry and fine. In the sunshine, 23, 24, most places in the high teens or the low 20s. Fairly cooler though with the breeze in northern Scotland, which is still there on Sunday and still providing a few showers for the Highlands, the Northern Isles and the Western Isles in particular. Some may get blown into the northeast, but again, they shouldn't last too long. Most places further south, dry, fine and sunny. And again, in the sunny spells, temperatures getting into the low to mid-20s.
The latest GB News travel.
Good evening, I'm Johnny Ratner. On the M1 in Derbyshire, the inside lane on that four-lane stretch, Conegolf southbound at junction 29, the A617 Chesterfield Mansfield exit. They're in the process of recovering a lorry that has broken down. Right on the Nottinghamshire-Derby border to the southeast of Ilkeston, the A609 remains closed through Trow at the scene of a serious accident. There are long queues heading south down the M6 through Staffordshire just after junction 15. The Stoke-on-Trent turn off the inside lanes closed for emergency barrier repairs. Northwest of Lincoln, the A57 Saxelby Road closed at Burton Waters following a free vehicle collision. There are long delays heading south through Essex on the M11 from junction 9 to 8 if you're heading towards Stansted towards the A120 following an accident blocking off the inside lane. And the Surrey stretch of the M25 queuing anti-clockwise through the roadworks at 6 at Godstone. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
This is Dewbs & Co with me, Bev Turner, sitting in for Michelle Dewberry this evening. Ben Habib is still here and Paul Embry, which is lucky, otherwise it would just be me. But the World Health Organization, let's move on, has declared an Mpox outbreak as a public health emergency. They have said the emergence of a new clade of Mpox, its rapid spread in eastern DRC, this is the Democratic Republic of Congo, and the reporting of cases in several neighbouring countries are very worrying. On top of outbreaks of other Mpox clades in DRC and other countries in Africa, it's clear that a coordinated international response is needed to stop these outbreaks and save lives. Ben, there are a few phrases more likely to make my blood run cold than a coordinated international response.
I know exactly what you mean.
Forgive me for being cynical, sceptical, maybe you would say wise after the pandemic that we went through.
Yeah.
What's going on here is my question.
Well, I mean, at a political level, a number of things are going on. You know, one of the political things that I think is going on is the following. I looked at that announcement this morning, and literally I just rolled my eyes and thought, couldn't care less.
Yeah.
Because we've heard so much, so the frighteners was put on us with COVID, like the whole world's gonna implode. And actually the death count in the end was pretty much what people forecast would have happened if we hadn't done any lockdowns, if we hadn't taken any remedial measures. The virus would have played out the way it was going to play out. And I remember Boris Johnson likening the fight against COVID to our fight in World War II, saying, you know, they're on the same level. But of course, in World War II, people gave up their lives to save civil liberty. With the pandemic, we gave up our civil liberties to save our lives. They were opposite. And I think we talked in the earlier segment about the infantilizing of the electorate. We've got to stop infantilizing people. If there's a risk out there, we need to point that risk out, and then it's up to people to take whatever steps they wish to take to protect themselves if they feel they need protection. But we can't be mollycoddling the people of the United Kingdom to the nth degree.
That's radical, dangerous speak, Ben Habib, and I won't have it in my studio. The idea that people should be allowed to make their own decisions. The problem is, Paul, that because so much trust in public health authorities particularly has disappeared after the pandemic, I don't know how we ever get that back.
No, that's probably true. The time will tell how serious this particular outbreak is, but unless it is particularly serious and poses a serious threat to the majority of the population of the human race. Let's take Britain as an example. I certainly would not be wanting to see mass lockdowns again. I think we've paid an enormous price in all sorts of ways from the previous one.
All the inflation that we were talking about was as a result of lockdown. Let's not mistake.
There was certainly, I mean, Ukraine obviously had an impact as well.
That was a two-bit player by comparison.
Certainly the opening up of the economy after the pandemic was a big one. I would have preferred us to take the Swedish approach, and I think Sweden has been...
Did you always feel like that?
Yeah, I think I did. I think if you look at the stuff that I argued and said and wrote at the time, I think that broadly was my opinion, that actually, of course, there are vulnerable people in these sorts of situations, and you need to do what you can to throw a shield around those people. The people who are really under serious threat from whatever the condition is. Any civilised society would deploy any resources to make sure that its most vulnerable, its sick, its elderly, its infirm are protected. But actually, it never quite made sense to me that for a disease that didn't affect the vast majority of people, in a serious way, in a serious way, it wasn't going to prove fatal for most people, we decided to quarantine the entire population. That never made sense to me, rather than concentrating on the vulnerable. And as I say, I think we've paid an enormous price for that.
The risk with Mpox, as we're now calling it, because you can't call it monkeypox, in the DCR, is to eat bushmeat or have unprotected homosexual sex with men with pustules. So that's my advice.
Well, I'm not doing either of those.
Why don't you put the two together?
But I mean...
That's an interesting evening.
I mean, this is the thing. The British sense of humour, particularly, is to sort of make light. And it is a serious issue if you are in the Democratic Republic of Congo.
But I think
it has cost lives.
That is a manageable risk.
I think so. Right, I think we have to take a quick break now.
Trying to get that image out of my head.
Yeah, sorry if you're just having your tea. But coming up, still to come, Olympians, including boxer Imaine Khalif, we've got the giggles now, and breakdancer Ray Gunn say they've been subject to huge online bullying and, guess what, Online hate, that's what they're calling it. More on that soon.
Sunday with Michael Portillo from 11, only on GB News.
The Northern Opera Group performs rare and wonderful operas in imaginative ways, enabling audiences and artists to discover new works and composers from across opera's history. The group produces the annual Leeds Opera Festival, which combines new productions of rare operas with a wide range of talks, panel discussions, workshops and other events. 2024 marks the festival's 8th season, and it's set to offer the world a premiere of Northern Opera Group's latest commission, Sherlock Holmes and the Sign of Four, an interpretation of the Sir Arthur Conan Doyle 19th century mystery novel. It's the first ever opera adaptation of the enigmatic detective. The artistic director of the Northern Opera Group, David Ward, joins me now to tell us more. David, welcome to GB News. If this is the first time that Sherlock Holmes has been translated into opera, I'm imagining that may mean that it's quite difficult to do. Is that so?
It's certainly a creative challenge, yes, and we knew that when we started on the project. I mean, as you'll know, opera traditionally has been slower-paced stories, ones that relied on less kind of narrative drive and action. So our first challenge was actually how do we translate this kind of story into opera? So it's about looking at that musical language we use, the theatrical language, and I very much hope that we have been able to find a solution to do that. Well, it first started in 2020 when we all had a lot of time on our hands, and I finally picked up the Sherlock Holmes novels to have a read. And as I was reading them, it just struck me that these could make a fantastic opera, as well as those great theatrical set pieces. You know, you've also got a wonderful kind of cast of characters that you could have on stage. I also got really interested in this idea of how do you use music to show Sherlock's internal world.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Welcome to State of the Nation, daily plunge into the stories shaping our country. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Monday to Thursday we bring you the insights, the facts, the truth about how our country is being governed. Because what happens in Downing Street matters down your street. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Patrick Christie's. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threat and so on.
As time passes,
She could have saved Storm.
you made my argument for me.
My guests and I tackle the issues that really matter with a sharp take on every story.
Went everywhere.
Something practical could be done.
Or I can become something different. Patrick Christie's tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Dewbs & Co with me, Bev Turner, Ben Habib and Paul Embry stood here. We're giggling a bit, but you know what? It's the end of a stressful week, isn't it? It's a Friday night, so stick with us. So this is a bit light-hearted. The Olympic breakdancer Ray Gunn has called the backlash that she's received since competing in Paris 2024 devastating. The 36-year-old Australian has been criticised and also slightly sort of laughed at following her performance in Paris. Let's remind ourselves. Tired of watching it. Celebrities, including Fatboy Slim, have rushed to her defence. Meanwhile, boxer Iman Khalif is suing the likes of Elon Musk and J.K. Rowling for what she's describing as aggravated cyber harassment. Both of these athletes, I use that term, loosely, are basically complaining about the fact that they're getting hate online, Paul. They're two quite different stories, but they do have a sort of similar theme about the fact that these are women complaining about things that people are saying about them.
Yeah.
Do you see them as different or similar?
They are very different. The first one is quite comical.
She doesn't think it is.
No, but it is. I mean, she was mimicking a kangaroo, I think, at one point. And I mean, I'm not being nasty, but why is breakdancing in the Olympics? Why not?
It's not anymore. It's not anymore.
Thank goodness.
They've dropped it.
Why not Morris dancing and ballroom dancing?
Right, Maypole.
Why shouldn't they have it? And to be fair, look, she had a bash and it didn't turn out great. And I don't think there should be a pile-on. I mean, it's probably embarrassing enough for her without millions of people on social media piling in on her and saying, you know, it shamed the country and embarrassed the country and what have you. I think that probably is a bit unkind, actually, and a bit unnecessary. But the second story...
It's not hate, though, is it? She's describing it as hate.
It's probably not hate. You know, everybody describes any criticism these days as hate, don't they? So that's no great surprise. The second story is serious because you effectively had what I think is what many people believe was a biological man. It's certainly in the technical sense.
Well, when you say the technical sense, I think that the understanding being, and it hasn't been confirmed, is that Imran Khalif is XY chromosomes, but may appear may appear female from the outside, but doesn't have ovaries and a womb, etc.
But in my view, I think most people conclude that you know, that person is a biological man, and certainly when you look at that person and the difference in power. In strength, in ability, in the ring with the people that he was fighting.
Yeah. Do you call them he?
It's wrong.
Do you call them he, as opposed to she?
Yeah, I think I do. Somebody with those XY chromosomes, for me, is a biological man. I don't think it's unreasonable to say that. And you know, if you were a woman in that ring with that person being smashed about, I think you'd conclude it was probably a man as well.
She was raised apparently. Ben, as far as I know, here she is now, post-Olympics. She was raised as a girl in Algeria. Certainly the image of her on the shoulders of her trainers, her personal trainers, her boxing coaches, wearing shorts, being carried aloft. There's a lot of people, Muslims online, saying if they saw her as a woman, she wouldn't be carried in that way. It would be deemed sort of disrespectful for her as a woman. So they concluded, therefore, they must see her as a man. What do you make of
Well, I'm not as clear-cut on this particular case as I might otherwise be. So just to be clear, I don't think a man self-identifying as a woman, even if he has had surgery, becomes a woman. I just don't accept that. And I disagree with the terminology of a transgender woman, because he's still a man. He's a transgender guy. You know, he's a guy who's transgendered. But this is different. This is someone who has apparently the XY chromosome. As you say, we're not sure. She's born to, I believe, with female genitalia. So she...
The appearance of... I think it's sexual... what's it? DSD. So I need to remember what the terminology is. Distorted sexual...
disorder, isn't it?
Yeah. Sexual development disorder, thank you.
It is a very rare condition, but it is a physical, biological condition.
Yeah.
And many people are brought up as a girl, if they have that condition, and they believe themselves to be a girl. And she has competed all her life as a woman. And she's lost amateur fights, by the way. She has lost fights. Yeah. It's not as if she's had a stellar rise to the Olympics and just won it. She was disqualified from the World Cup because of her...
The IFA had different rules, didn't they?
Different rules. But I have some sympathy for her, for him, her. You know, it's a rare physical condition, and it can't be easy to live with it.
No.
And do you think she should be taking Elon Musk and J.K. Rowling to court?
She's going to lose, because she's got no case.
But you see,
what's the case?
I was talking to a lawyer, actually, and in fact, this will be on Neil Oliver's show on Sunday evening, if you want to watch it there. A lawyer that was saying she might have, under French law...
Oh, really?
Because they're very strict about online hate in France, more than they are here.
Well, I mean, if such a lawsuit were to prove successful, I think that would be a complete nonsense. The idea that J.K. Rowling and Elon Musk are somehow legally culpable for expressing their views or criticism and can find themselves on the wrong side of the law in any country, I think is appalling.
Well, we've come the full circle. We started there, gentlemen, and we will finish it as well. Thank you both. It's so good to see you both. Right, Lee Anderson is up next. But here's, first of all, your weather. Have a lovely weekend.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Evening, welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office. Here on GB News, the weekend is upon us, and for most of us, it's going to be a fine weekend. Dry for the vast majority, with some sunny spells and temperatures about the average for the middle of August. One weather fronts that cleared away last night, still lingering close across northern France, and another one is approaching the northwest. So here, yes, it isn't going to be sunny all weekend. There will be sunny overnight, plenty of showers, and a fairly gusty wind, actually, across the far north of Scotland. Further south, most places with clear skies, lighter winds. That will allow it to turn quite a bit cooler, quite a bit more comfortable compared to recent warm and humid nights. It does make for a fresh start, but generally a sunny start in the south. There'll be some sunshine across northeastern parts of Scotland, but further west and further north there will be quite a lot of cloud, a few showers moving through and a fairly gusty wind. So just be prepared for that if you're going into the mountains of Scotland tomorrow. Well, quite a significant wind chill. A coolish start too for Northern Ireland, some cloud, the odd shower possible over northwest England, but they shouldn't last too long for the majority across England and Wales. It's a fine, bright, sunny start, and many places will hang on to sunny spells throughout the day. Yes, some cloud will bubble up. It's not going to be one of those crystal clear blue sky days, but sunny spells throughout. Still a few scattered showers over the far north of England, at times across Scotland, but they should be fairly light. They should tend to zip through, one or two of them maybe in Northern Ireland, but most of the day certainly dry, and across the south dry and fine. In the sunshine, 23, 24, most places in the high teens or the low 20s. Fairly cooler though with the breeze in northern Scotland, which is still there on Sunday and still providing a few showers for the Highlands, the Northern Isles and the Western Isles in particular. Some may get blown into the northeast, but again, they shouldn't last too long. Most places further south, dry, fine and sunny. And again, in the sunny spells, temperatures getting into the low to mid-20s.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good evening, I'm Johnny Ratner. Big problems in Derbyshire on the M1. The motorway is now blocked southbound junction 29, the A617, Chesterfield and Mansfield turnoff. They're recovering a lorry that's broken down, leaving lengthy queues on the approach. And the M6 in Warwickshire is down to a single lane northbound from the M42 up to junction 5, the Castle Bromwich exit, and the scene of an accident causing long queues towards Birmingham. On the M6 in Staffordshire, the inside lane's blocked southbound just after junction 15 for Stoke-on-Trent for emergency barrier repairs. On the Hertfordshire stretch of the M25, the anti-clockwise exit's partly blocked at junction 23 at the A1M where a vehicle's broken down. The Surrey stretch of the M25 seeing long queues anti-clockwise into the roadworks at 6 at Godson, and on the M20 in Kent, the inside lane shut coastbound at the M26 where a lorry and a car have collided. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Celebrate a spectacular summer with your chance to win an incredible £30,000 in tax-free cash in our Great British Giveaway. It's the biggest prize of the year so far, and it's totally tax-free.